Greetings, traveler. I am SnapJelly, and a lot of times people ask me to do more fight reviews about fights that happen in Game of Thrones. Now, I love doing those videos, don't get me wrong, but they are very hard to do, and that's for one reason only. It's because various levels of skill in sword fighting in the show. And I'm not talking about the characters, I'm talking about the actors. Now don't get me wrong, I don't blame the actors for anything. I get that they're actors and not sword fighters, and as somebody who does stage fights himself, I can say that getting a realistic staged fight is impossible. Like, at some point, one of the two people fighting is just gonna get in some sort of squabble where he would die, unless the person attacking doesn't see it, which is kind of a lame excuse. So, no hard feelings towards the cast or crew in Game of Thrones, absolutely not. But there are some exceptions to this rule though, like for example, Syrio Forel and Arthur Dane. Like, both the styles they use, they aren't particularly effective in actual sword fighting, but they definitely look like they know what they're doing. Their footwork is correct, they move their weapons very smoothly, so it doesn't always happen, but I blame this mostly on lack of preparation time. At least that's what I think happens. Because if you have actors that do multiple fights, you can actually see varying degrees of skill in different fights, right? So it makes me guess that they simply have more time to prep for some fights as they have for other fights. Which makes a lot of sense, but it makes it hard for me to judge those fights. So today I want to talk about the overall sword fighting in Game of Thrones and some of the bad sword fighting you see. And don't get me wrong, it's not like all sword fighting in Game of Thrones is bad. Absolutely not. But, well, I just wanted to talk about the bad things, just to give you guys a bit of understanding about what would happen in a real sword fight comparative to a stage fight, and so on and so further. So no hard feelings towards Game of Thrones. I think I've apologized enough. So let's just start. Now the first one I want to talk about is the fight between Jaime and Brienne. Now, the fight itself is not bad at all. In fact, it's decent actually. It's fairly good, and in terms of actors, I think Brienne is one of the better sword fighters, considering she does it herself. But what gets me is the beginning of the fight. Before the fight starts, they do this little pose, kind of as a dance together.
Ooh. You move well. For a great beast of a woman.
Jaime even makes a smart remark saying that she moves well. Now the thing is, they're not really moving well. What's happening is Jaime does a kind of thing and Brienne kind of copies the kind of thing, but that's not necessary. I mean, this could mean all kinds of things. If they thought about it, it could mean that they're kind of in sync, or that she knows what he is trying to do and tries to adapt, or that they have like similar levels of skill in terms of sword fighting. But it doesn't really make sense. Like, if your opponent is assuming a guard, you don't have to assume the same guard the opposite way. It's not necessary at all. And secondly, that's not a guard. Like, Jaime is supposed to be that great sword fighter, right? But what they're doing is they are standing like this, and in one shot you can even see Brienne resting her sword on her elbow like that. Now if you do this and somebody attacks you from that side and like applies pressure to that side of the sword, so from here, what happens is, making sure I don't smack the camera, what happens is this thing slides towards your neck. Why would you want that to happen? If you hold it like this, you're not going to have it rest on your elbow. That's really dumb, because you can apply a lot of leverage right here. That's why this is called the weak of the blade. So a little smack towards the tip and my own sword will fly towards my neck. Now that's not something I want. And if they apply pressure the other way around, like from this side, right? Again, this part is called the weak of the blade. That's because if you yank this thing right here, there's not much I can do. You have a lot of leverage if you grab the sword here, right? And I'm bringing the weak of my sword very close to my body, right? So if somebody smacks this out of the way, which they could do very easily, then they are going to be very close to my body already. Now, what I could do, in fact, I think it's the only thing I can do, is step back, kind of turn my sword around like that, make sure I don't hit the ceiling, and turn this into an unterhaal. But that takes way too long, because you have to make this entire circle in order to do that. So why would you do it in the first place? What I think this guard is supposed to be is kind of like an ox guard, like this, but like a messed up one. I think, I don't know, but one of the important things about the ox guard is that you stretch your primary arm, right? Because your elbow has this locking mechanism that if it's stretched, you can push all you want, but it's not going to bend. But if you hold it like this, then your opponent can very easily control your arm. And they still could have done this little like mimicry thing with this guard. Like they could have just hold it like this, and then as they turn around, hold it like that. Because this is not an ox guard, this is just called a hanging left arm, right? But it's also not German longsword, like the ox guard is German longsword and this is not. Doesn't matter. Anyway, they could have still done this, and it would have been a proper guard, you know, something that you would assume that sword fighters would know and do. The fight itself is not bad at all. I enjoyed it. This is pretty good, actually. So yeah, I enjoyed it. The second thing I wanted to talk about is when Bronn fights Sir Vardis Egan, I think he's called. And that's also an awfully lot requested fight for me to review. But I am gonna do it, don't get me wrong, but in due time, because again, it's difficult. The thing I wanted to address is the overhand blocky thing that Bronn tends to do, which is kind of just standing like this and blocking a sword this way, right on top, and then he deflects it with his guard off to the side. Now, that is not particularly wrong. But here's the thing. You gotta keep in mind what Bronn was thinking during the fight, and that makes it really hard, because like on one hand it looks like he's kind of toying with Sir Vardis or whatever he's called. On the other hand, there is an awful lot in the fight where Bronn seems like he's in trouble and actually has to run away. And because his life is on the line and he doesn't want to die, you know, it makes it seem like he's not toying around. So in that case, he is just waiting for a good opportunity to strike, right? So why, if you deflect a weapon like that, don't you do anything else? That's the thing. It's not a very common thing, like that kind of like smacking a sword out of the way with your guard, but it can happen. And if you do, for one example, if I deflect a sword this way, and I deflect it that way, then I could just go for a false cut like this. Very simply. He's not protected in his neck, it's Sir Vardis Egan, so that would get him the win. And also, Sir Vardis Egan is really slow. That's that, you know. Again, the varying degrees of skill thing that I mentioned. He's very slow. So if you want to take that into an account, considering how fast Bronn is, a simple again hanging guard like this could have deflected a simple strike, and then you could have stabbed him in the neck, for example. So again, there are all kinds of things Bronn could have done. What he did wasn't particularly wrong, but why would he choose that? Like, why would he choose to dodge and block all of those weapons before he actually strikes? He has plenty of opportunity to strike. But again, it's depending on how nitpicky you want me to be. Again, this fight, it looks really cool. It's awesome. I love it. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the fight between the Mountain and the Hound during the jousting, like all the way in the beginning. See, this is one of the earliest fights, if not the earliest fight actually in the show, and when I watched it I was like, really? Because again, I think that it's just because they didn't have enough preparation time, because if you look at it closely, it really seems like they're kind of holding back both the Mountain and the Hound, and that they're not really sure if the other person is sure what they are gonna do. And you see this in a lot of moves that they do, like for example this. If you look at it closely, you can actually see the Mountain holding his swing back. As you would normally swing, quite simply, you would extend your arms, right? And the Mountain, he kind of does this, to swing, is that? And I think that is because the Hound was supposed to dodge, and he dodges is kind of like that. Now, it's not really a secure thing to do. I also don't understand why, because he could just simply block. But why? He was supposed to do this, and if the mountain extends his sword too much, he might hit him in the face. Right? I think that's the reason. So he kind of holds back his swing and be like, And I blame it on preparation time. I think they did not have much preparation time for this fight. Also, there's no footwork. They just kind of stand there like normally. Basics of sword fighting. If you attack, you step in with the foot you attack with, and if you deflect also, if you're blocking also, you step back. So you have a bit of movement, not an awful lot, but a bit of movement. And there's none of that. So I think they just kind of choreographed the hands movements really quickly and just went on with it. You can also see an awful lot of them moving the swords wrongly. Like the mountain, for example, strikes from this side, and what the Hound does is he moves the sword this way and kind of just stabs it in between. While normally, if you get a strike from this side, you would just step back and move your sword over there, or move it down like that, like in the opposite direction. He's doing it wrong, in a matter of speech. The later fight, though, with the Mountain and Brienne is way better again, which is also requested a lot, which I will also review. Don't get me wrong, I'll review all of them in due time. But you know, these are just some of the points that reoccurring in Game of Thrones that make it hard to do that. Again, no hard feelings towards anybody in Game of Thrones, right? I love the show, it's great. This video is just for fun, and to show you guys a bit about actual sword fighting. So, I hope you guys enjoyed. I sure did. If you survived this long, you might as well subscribe. And thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one. Bye, guys.